Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you so much for joining. We're looking forward to sharing with you our 4-day week and what we implemented at Atom. I'm Anne-Marie, I'm the Chief People Officer at Atom. Atom's the UK's first app-only bank. It was founded in 2014 when it was a mere idea back then. A small group of people came together with a shared objective of changing the banking industry for good and for the better, ensuring that customers got a better deal. I've been at the bank since 2014, designing and building the people experience, processes and policies. I worked with the chief exec and the senior management team and everyone at Atom on the 4-day week idea. And I oversaw the planning and the implementation, working with the people experience team and everyone in the business to make it a success. So we're really pleased to be here today to share our experiences and the fundamental change that it's made to our business. It's had an incredibly positive impact on our people and our customers, and it's got quite a few people talking too. So we're asked many times each week if we can spare 15 minutes, 30 minutes to share our experiences and why we did it, why and how we made it happen and the impact it's had. So in the true spirit of finding efficiencies in how we work, and more about that later, we thought a webinar could work well. So this morning, I'm joined by David Castling, who's the Head of Intermediary Distribution at Atom Bank. For the last 7 years, he's held a number of roles across the bank, including distribution, mortgage originations, and several years as the Head of Customer Services. He was key in building and embedding the intermediary team prior to the receipt of its first mortgage application in 2016 and launched the mortgage proposition into the intermediary market under the banner of the UK's first app-only bank, a proposition which is now multi-award winning. Dave held the role of Head of Customer Services at Atom as we embarked on our 4-day week journey and has joined us today to share his experiences in leading Atom's largest operational function through the significant change. Dave has a master's degree in executive entrepreneurship from Durham University Business School, and when he's not at Atom, you can find him in the hills and spending time with his 2 children and in Northumberland. We're also joined by Andrew Barnes. So Andrew has made a career of market-changing innovation and in industry digitisation, leading and transforming companies in the UK, Australia and New Zealand. In 2018, he made international headlines with an idea when he believed he could raise productivity in the workplace, whilst also contributing to the personal well-being of his staff. It was the 4-day week. In 2019, he wrote the 4-day week book as a guide for companies to try and reduce working hours and increase productivity. Andrew's vision is to provide a community environment for companies, researchers, academics and interested parties to be able to connect and advance this idea of the future of work. Through his work, he's on the advisory boards of both the US and Ireland 4-day week campaigns and the board of the newly created Wellbeing Research Centre at Oxford University and is a founding member of the World Wellbeing Movement. Andrew's going to share more with us on the 100-80-100 model and the results of the recent UK pilot in which over 3,000 employees participated in a 4-day week trial. We also have time for some questions at the end, and many of you have sent us questions. Thank you so much for those, which we'll answer hopefully throughout our presentation. And of course, we'll have time at the end. If you do have any questions, drop them into the Q&A section that you can find on your screen. And just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. If you don't want to be involved in the recording, please let us know and we'll make sure that that will happen. But it will enable us to provide some additional information for people who can't make the webinar. So moving on, I'm going to kind of take you through the first part of the webinar in a sense of how and why we decided to do it. So I talked to you about Atom being the first app-only bank, founded in 2014 and launched in 2016. We're based in Durham in the northeast, and our team is around 475 people at the moment. We've built a sustainable business in the region and beyond. And one of our aims is not just to change banking for good, but to provide interesting, sustainable and enjoyable employment for people who will then in turn provide incredible customer experiences. So our mission is to change banking for good and for the better. We don't believe customers get a fair deal from banks, and we're here to challenge the status quo and change an industry which we believe needs significant change. So next slide. Next slide. Thank you. And that's our team in Durham, in our office, in our HQ in Durham. So next slide, please. So we're a bank that's on your phone, as I'd said, and we help people who want to save, who want to buy a home and build their business. And in the last 12 months, Atom's remained at the top of the best buy tables for borrowers and savers. Customers have flocked to the bank in record numbers in the last year, and the service that we've offered them has remained some of the best in the country. The ratings on Atom's app, iOS and Android, reached new highs and are both now 5-star. We're rated 4.7 out of 5 on Trustpilot, which takes us to the 3rd highest rated bank in the UK. Now, why do I tell you this? Well, 4-day a week is as much about good business as it is people. And it's really important, and we'll share with you throughout our journey over the last 18 months, the success that our business has had and the service our customers has had, we believe has been a reflection in part from the experiences that our people have. So next slide, please. So like everybody, when the pandemic arrived and when we were all working within it, many people were looking inside their organisations to see actually what's going on. How were our people feeling? Our people were telling us at the time that they were feeling a little bit stressed, a little more stressed. Their health and well-being wasn't what it used to be. They were working longer hours, but didn't feel like they were producing or didn't feel like they were achieving any more than the hours they were putting in. Internally as well, we were looking at our business and wanted to kind of come out of the pandemic as a much stronger and sustainable business, much bigger and better than we were previously. So we were reviewing our employee value proposition and looking at the impact of the Great Resignation, the scarcity of skills in the tech sector in which we operate, as well as many other businesses. So attrition, employee turnover and employees leaving our organisation was an interest and a concern for us. Sickness rates, engagement, overtime, and kind of lots of other kind of people metrics we started to look at. So productivity and efficiency were really important to us. We wanted to capitalise on the feedback from our people to ensure that we were meeting their needs in terms of their well-being and their work-life balance. Next slide, please. So hybrid working was prolific and still is at that time. It's something that I think people are still trying to kind of grapple with. And there have been many business benefits from hybrid working. Atom has benefited from those, and we continue to work in a hybrid model with some of our people working from home, in the office, and we ask them to work wherever they are most productive for the work that they are doing. So hybrid working is here and it's here to stay. However, when we were looking across our organisation, we didn't believe that that was the answer, the total answer, and didn't believe that many businesses, we thought actually there was more to it. So we started to look at other things that we could implement that would benefit both our business and our people. And that's where the research on the 4-day a week arrived. So 4-day a week has been something I've been interested in for many years. And there've been many famous studies in Iceland, in New Zealand, which is Andrew's study, Perpetual Guardian in New Zealand, and I'll let him talk about that. And there've been studies in the UK also in terms of the environmental impact that organisations can have by switching to a 4-day week. So there's lots of data out there and lots that we could lean on in looking to see how we could make improvements across our business. Next slide, please. And we actually came to the realization that, if the research was to be believed, then this is absolutely something that we could benefit from. So we started to think about how we might do this. We pitched the idea with senior managers in the business, and we started to think around how we might plan to operate over a 4-day week. So Atom went from a 37.5-hour week, which was originally worked over 5 days, down to 34 hours, but for no reduction in pay. And the key piece here was finding efficiencies. So next slide, please. It wasn't about working harder and longer. It was about finding efficiencies and working smarter, enabling our teams and our people to tell us where they could find those efficiencies, thereby making our business more productive and releasing them for the time in terms of their own well-being, that they could spend doing whatever they like, family, friends, whatever. So we started our planning in September 2021. We worked with department and function heads to make sure that we did some key kind of planning across the days and weeks. Atom's a fully regulated bank. We have kind of commitments to our regulators. We have compliance standards, and of course we have commitments to our customers. We operate 24 hours a day as an app, 7 days a week, and our customer window is from 8 till 8. That was never going to be compromised, and neither were our regulative or compliance kind of requirements. Our employees were key in this as well, and in terms of our planning, it was really important that if at any point in our planning or in our trial that we thought it was having a detrimental impact on our employees, then that was something that was going to be key to us in either overcoming or in stopping the trial. So we had some really key markers and measures right at the beginning of that journey. So we took 6 weeks roughly to plan. We asked each department to return an operational plan, and Dave will talk much more about this very shortly. We asked them to highlight any key risks and any material risks that they saw from embarking on a trial in each of those 3 key areas. We didn't find any material risks in our initial planning, and we decided in November 2021 to move the entire organisation on a trial basis to a 34-hour working week over 4 days. We carried that out for 3 months. We decided to extend it for another 3. Our initial 3 months took us over the Christmas period, and it was key for us in measuring organisation and departmental productivity metrics that we had good, solid data and feedback from our people. 6 months into the trial, our trial we deemed was a success. We had great response from our people. Our customer metrics positively trended, and so did our organisation metrics. Next slide, please. Just a few things here that I've referenced in terms of engagement, our attrition, our turnover metrics over 12 months, our overtime and our sickness metrics. They all trended positively, but within the year, within the 18 months while we've been doing this, there have been challenges to overcome. It's not always easy to implement big organisation change like this. However, the benefits can be huge, as we've found. So our applications into Atom increased. The week after we announced the trial in November, direct applications to Atom increased by 500%. That's kind of remained pretty well. It kind of remained stable around 35% increase month on month. So we've definitely seen an influx in people interested in working at Atom and interested in our roles. So fewer people are leaving our organisation. Sickness has reduced. Overtime has decreased, engagement has increased, and our Glassdoor feedback and comparisons show Atom to be ahead of competitors in the finance sector. So we've heard many stories from people, people saving money on childcare, people spending more time with their families, and people spending time alone as their children are in childcare and making the most of that day, and helping with elderly parents, taking up a new skill or a new hobby. And some people in our team have told us how it's fundamentally changed not only their personal lives, but how they work, because they've managed to find efficiencies in their day that has made their work more interesting, challenging, and actually they can focus on the things that bring even more value to the business. So how did we really make it happen? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry, these are just some of the stats that I've talked you through. So how did we make it happen? So going to hand over to Dave Castling, who I'd said was head of customer services at the time we embarked on the trial. Dave led one of our biggest, our biggest operational function through not only the planning but the implementation. And he'll talk to you now about how that was, how it felt, and actually how we made it happen.
Brilliant, thanks Anne-Marie, and thanks for the introduction. And really pleased to be here this morning to tell you a bit about, I guess, about the how. We've talked quite a lot about the why. If we can just move on to the first slide, that'd be great. So when we announced this, I guess with a lot, in similar nature with a lot of big announcements, people go through a myriad of emotions. So there was an initial level of excitement from our staff. Followed quite quickly by disbelief. Have we dangled a massive carrot that you're not really going to go and deliver on? And then quite a lot of people jumping to the end state over how do we get from A to B? And as people start to consider what this meant for them in their individual roles, there were some people worried around, well, how do I condense the volume of work I need to do into a 4-day working week? In particular, when we know that Atom Bank is a 7-day operation. So how on earth were we going to make that work? So lots of questions invariably came up, and we sought to deal with those as we went through the planning process. Just go to the next slide. So what we did, the department under my remit at the time had 6 departments all doing very different things, covering 7 days a week from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, 85 staff, and the full mix of full-time, part-time shift patterns. And the departments that sat beneath me ranged from a contact center, dealing with inbound customer contact over the 7 days a week, through to payments to reconciliations, all doing different tasks with different demands on their time. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, no, sorry, just a delay there. So what we needed to look at, so team sizes. So all of our teams are different sizes, and that has a bearing on the planning cycle. Departments had questions that needed to be raised that we needed to answer. A number of people had preferred days off. So we looked at initial planning over, well, when would people like to take their additional day off? We knew there were going to be challenges that came up. And it was very much an attitudinal shift over, we knew there were going to be challenges, but they were challenges to be dealt with, not to be relented to. We were very keen on understanding customer impact, in that there shouldn't be any negative customer impact on this initiative. And measures and productivity were key. We needed to understand what was being measured, that we had enough measures in place before we embarked on this. And it was really important to make sure we had a starting point we could benchmark against. We looked at the elements of risk management, and there was some considerations around external environment. If something happened in the financial services industry or something more existential, could you cope from a resilience point of view in the same way that you would be able to if you had all of your staff in over the 5 days a week? Next slide, please. So in terms of involving the teams, as is often the way, problems, the answers to problems in particular, can invariably be solved by the people that work for you. So it's really super important to have all of our staff involved. So we set up a number of workshops across the teams. We made sure we had all of our current service levels benchmarked and recorded, so we knew what the starting line looked like. And we set about forming a cohort of volunteers who were willing to go and do this for a trial period, to dip a toe in and test drive it and really flush out some of those challenges, in that we can refine the approach before rolling it out to a broader audience within the bank. Next slide, please. So in terms of impact assessment, I guess there's an inflection point around what service do you need to provide to your customer base. We very much approach this with a view around do no harm. So we're going to change what we're doing internally, but we don't want to see any degradation in terms of the service and the benchmarking of where we started. So that involved looking at what tasks must be completed intraday. As a regulated bank, we have some elements in certain departments where things have to be done within within a day. Again, I mentioned before, we looked around team size. The impact of a 4-day working week on a team that only has 3 people in it, as an example, is very different to the impact of a team that has 12. So we needed to make sure, well, how can we square that away and make sure it works for everybody? Management cover needed was flushed out as part of that impact assessment. If you've only got one layer of management and something needs to be escalated and it's on their regular day off, what are you going to do about that? So we needed to look at multiple layers of escalation routes within teams as part of the impact assessment. And again, the interconnectivity of other departments and third-party suppliers. If you've got an area where your staff have elected to take a Friday off, if they're dependent or a dependee on another department that are in on that day, that's going to cause some friction. So you need to look at the areas that are broader than your immediate line reports and look at those other impacts. Next slide, please. So the challenges we saw when we went through the trial, I guess don't expect or don't be despondent if you don't get it right first time. Expect there'll be challenges and expect you'll need to make adjustments as you go through this. I think you've probably landed luckily if you deploy this and you don't need to change any of the plan. So you need to be flexible, and you really need to engender flexibility to make sure that people are prepared to move around, to get this to work on behalf of the bank. And be honest. If things aren't working, we need to be honest that they're not and try and find solutions. And we need our staff to be honest. I think there's always a fear if you've presented something that they really, really want, you don't want them to be reticent and coming forward with challenges for fear of it being removed. But we were really clear that we didn't want any cracks papering over when we went through this. And different roles are going to have different experiences, and that's definitely what we saw. But data's really key. So you need to test and retest the metrics. So you have your baseline that you've already benchmarked, going on a regular basis, bench it again. You're looking at all the SLAs, are they still being achieved? And retest the sentiment of your staff as you're going through that, either the trial period or your deployment, to make sure that you're not leaving anybody behind on the journey that you're embarking on. Next slide, please. So the issues we faced, for some staff, but it was a really small amount. 4 longer days didn't work. And these are some of the things that you don't always immediately consider. So what are people going to do around childcare arrangements? If they have to do an extra hour on a normal day, does that work for their family life? So how are you going to accommodate that? But you should seek to accommodate that. We had to work out the impact of a 4-day week on current part-time staff. So what does that pro-ratering exercise look like? Holiday allowances, do you adjust those? Do you not adjust them? If you do adjust them, what does that look like and how is it communicated? There was almost a default setting that everybody raised the flag of success that we're all going to get a Friday off. If you're a 7-day operation or a 5-day or a 6-day operation where your customers need to be serviced, unless you're going to shut your business 1 day a week, that can't work, and that's not how we deployed it at Atom. We're open to customers 7 days a week, so unilaterally everybody taking the same day off wasn't going to work for us, and we found the compromise. And of course, your suppliers who are not embarking on that 4-day week journey are not going to be aligned to your working patterns, so you need to find the solutions for that as well. And ultimately, I think if you're losing 20% of your time, and we're not losing quite that because we dropped 4 hours, but if you were losing a full day, where are you going to drive that 20% efficiency saving from? Just doing the same thing you were doing before in the same manner will create issues. So it's how much time is wasted. We did a quite deep dive exercise on meeting length in particular, to try and find where we could find those efficiency savings to make the project work. And we did find some feedback from our staff that working that extra hour a day was an extra drain on physical exertion, which I'm not sure we would fully appreciate if that's something we'd run into, but it's a consideration. Next slide, please. So in terms of successes, some really dramatic and amazing figures actually on here. So when we did the surveys with our staff over the course of a 3-month window, we can see that we started off where pretty much everybody felt they had enough time to get everything that they done that they needed to do. We saw this drop as we went into the trial period, as people found their way over, well, how do I make this work for me? And those efficiencies were driven out of the process. But then we have seen it come back up to more or less the same level prior to the trial. The dramatic figures really around how often people feel stressed at work, that you can see on there, it's gone down from 43% to 15%. And again, the amount of people who are looking forward to coming to work has increased from 77% to 92%. It's a really positive data-driven signs that this is working for us. Next slide, please. And in terms of attrition, so you can see over the period our headcount's gone up. Anne-Marie talked a bit around the easier routes to recruitment and the more people we've attracted into the bank. And we can see that attrition has declined, sickness has declined, and really all the things that we hoped in terms of the benefits of this have really come to bear. So I'm going to leave you with that, but obviously we'll be around for Q&A, and I'm going to hand over to Andrew.
Good morning, everybody. So I always feel a chronic fraud on the 4-day week, because what I actually did with my business back in 2019 is I was trying to ask myself a very simple question, and that was, how do I improve productivity in my company? And that was driven by me reading a couple of research reports that indicated that, in fact, people were only productive for about 3 hours a day. And I wondered if that was happening in my company. And I thought, if it was happening in my company, what could I do about it? And the idea I came up with was actually saying to my people, well, I'll do a deal with you. If you can rethink how you work, what you're doing, but can deliver me the same amount of output, I'll gift you a day off a week. And so the concept really of the 4-day week was born. And the idea was around this concept, which we call the 100-80-100 rule. And that's 100% of pay, 80% time, but provided we get 100% productivity. So it's not about reducing targets, whether they're sales or otherwise. It's not about damaging customer service. All of those things are sacrosanct. They have to remain the same. It is purely trying to do it over a shorter period of time. Now, we were lucky enough then to bring in some researchers from Auckland University to work alongside what we were trying to do at Perpetual Guardian. And they researched our 4-day week. Now, when we did it, we initially had a policy that everybody took a day off a week, not all the same day. We are, like Atom Bank, a full service trustee business. We have retail branches, so we couldn't close. So we had people rotating each day off. And what we found was extraordinary. We found that engagement scores, that's enthusiasm, engagement with the company, all of those scores went up 40% to the levels that the researchers said were the highest levels they had ever seen in New Zealand. Stress levels dropped 15%, and more people said that they were better able to do their job working 4 days rather than 5. And that, we found, was absolutely extraordinary. So we decided to make the policy permanent. Now, I thought when I did this, because, Perpetual Guardian is probably one of the dullest companies in the world. You don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to work for a trust company. We've been around, unlike Atom, for about 130 years. So I didn't expect that this would make a lot of waves. But what happened was, when we announced the idea, we got deluged from media all around the world. And we got more when we announced the results of the trial, and then we got more when we announced in November 2018 that we were making it a permanent policy. So what we then did is we created this organization called 4-Day Week Global. And it's similar to the commentary that Anne-Marie said at the start. I physically just couldn't drink that much coffee with chief executives around the world to tell them what it is we had done. I wrote a book. I thought that might crack it, but it didn't. So we created 4-Day Week Global. And what we've done right from the get-go is we've shared everything about our journey, because we think this is a better way. And so if you go to the 4-Day Week website, 4dayweek.com, you will find on there our original research reports. You'll find our legal agreements that we did with the teams. You'll find almost everything, lots and lots of helpful articles about how to do a 4-day week. Because over the last 4 years, we have engaged with over 10,000 organizations around the world, talking to them about how you bring a 4-day week to a business near you. And this is a key point, I believe, because you may think that the 4-day week isn't very relevant for your business, but the reality is that this has now come in 4 years from something that was some mad hobbits at the bottom end of the world in New Zealand trying, to a policy that is now being discussed by governments and also being discussed at places like Davos or the European Economic Forum. So it's now a mainstream policy. And whether you agree with this or not, it's certainly something that you need to now, I think, be considering. Now, what we've done as 4-Day Week Global is we've run the largest group of pilot programs around the world. We've run them in the US, Canada, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. We've just had the results from the UK pilot, and we've got a pilot running in South Africa with large pilots about to start for the Portuguese government, and we're also working with the Spanish government, and there are major pilots going to be launched in each of the global time zones over the next 6 months. Now let's look at the UK results, because I think they broadly reflected what we found all over the world. That is that employees like it. Well, no shock there. Over 90% of employees say they like it. Interestingly, over 90% of employers also say they like it. We are not seeing drops in productivity. Remember, that was my original journey. In fact, productivity continued to grow, approximately 1% per month in the US trial, but slightly less than that in the UK trial. But interestingly, all the companies in both trials reported that actually they had significant higher levels of revenue than a comparable period the year before. So yes, that was impacted on COVID, but this policy is not at the expense of output. What you do see is absenteeism fall enormously. The UK study said absenteeism declined by about 65%. And actually, in an era of people clamoring for more pay, what we found was that actually this was far more valuable than just salary. When asked, 15% of people in the UK pilot said, actually, you know what? No amount of money you could pay me to make me go back to a 5-day week. Now, how can you get involved? Well, go to the website, 4-Day Week website, have a look. You can join one of our pilot programs, or alternatively, we also will have a digital program so you can try it yourself. And we can also, for larger organizations, customize a particular program. Now, I would like to leave you with one thought, that superficially you think this is hard, and it certainly isn't something that you do on a file and forget basis. But when I introduced it in my company, if this had gone wrong, it would have hurt my back pocket. And so I had a lot riding on this. I had to persuade a recalcitrant board that didn't like it, fix that by announcing it first on national television, that this was going to work. I would say that it is, without exception, the most sensible, rational business decision that I have made in 40 years of working and running companies. And at the end of the day, whether you can do this depends on the approach that leadership takes to a 4-day week. In the words of Henry Ford, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. But if you do it and you put the emphasis behind it, genuinely, you just won't regret it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was fantastic. And I guess leads into just the final section, the final points from the webinar piece. And there've been lots of questions coming in that we'll answer. But if you could just skip to the next slide, please. We're asked many questions, many questions about how we made it happen. We've given you a bit of that information. And if there's anything that we, would draw you back to is the research, the data, communicating and involving your people. But, all of those things are hugely important, but I'll absolutely echo what Andrew has just said. And if it's anything that I guess I've learned in the teams at Atom, it's the courage in giving it a go. It's giving it a go and treating it as a learning kind of situation as much, because looking inside your organisation at the things you probably pass by you every day, you learn and find out way more than you ever did before. And if your people can benefit in terms of well-being, finding efficiencies and innovative practices and giving it a go, I guess that's the biggest piece of advice that I certainly would give. You can ponder over data, you can ponder over research, but actually taking that leap and giving it a go is the best thing that we ever did. We've shared that, yes, there are challenges along the way. It's not an easy ride. Big change often isn't. But again, involving your people, they are the people that have the answers. They are doing the jobs every day, and they will be able to help you find the best ways to work. So we would recommend that many organisations actually do this and take the leap. And we are hugely supportive of the 4-day-a-week campaign and have mentored other organisations in support of people making the leap. So if you are interested, please get in touch with Andrew in the 4-day-a-week campaign. There'll be pilots running, and the support that they can give you is incredible. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide, I guess, and just wraps up in terms of, for me, some of the additional benefits that we've had in terms of, people talking about Atom, who we are as an employer and what we do. For me, it also brings it back to pride. And I genuinely believe that people want to be proud of who they work for. When we implemented 4-day-a-week, there was a range of emotions in the business, and Dave talked you through that, and we experienced them personally, but across departments. But actually, giving something a go, overcoming challenges, challenging the status quo and being different has really kind of appealed to our people. It's given us great feedback, it's given us great coverage, and our people have told us that they feel really proud to work for an organisation that has been brave and bold and looked for something that just hasn't benefited their well-being, but has made us an even bigger and successful business. So with that, we'll close our webinar this section, and we'll move over to some of the questions that have been coming in. Thank you very much for those who've submitted questions. And I'll ask my panelists to join me in answering some that have come in. So bear with me a second. So when you went to a 4-day-a-week and went public, did you actively consult with your customers and clients to gain their feedback? We didn't send a note out to customers specifically because, as we've said, we planned quite a detailed way in how we would maintain customer experience, our customer operational windows, and therefore there was no need to communicate to customers who would continue to receive the same experience and service. We did, through planning though, talk to some of our suppliers, so third-party suppliers, to ensure that they knew when we would be available, how we would provide cover, and actually how we would redefine the working relationship with them to ensure that we were still meeting their needs and they could meet ours. So I covered off that one. Dave, you did touch on this a little bit and I can pick up, but how do you overcome everyone wants to work a Friday off issue? Do your teams rotate over 4 days? Dave, do you want to pick that one up and then I can chip in as well?
Yes, it's you do. So we and it's a real mixed variety actually. So we've got some departments where they do Friday. Departments we've got staff members who do a combination of a day and a Friday, but they're fixed days, and it's not. We have some parts where between a Monday, Friday, and a Wednesday, and we've got some departments where it is different day on a staggered basis. So I think what we've really tried to do is to make it work for everybody, but making it for everybody doesn't mean it's the same for everybody. And that comes back to we need our people to go into this knowing that it's going to take some flexibility if we want to get the right outcome.
Yeah, and I would add to that, so for some of our support functions, we have seen a trend in either a Monday or a Friday off, but still providing that coverage across the team. So the people experience team, as an example, still operate over 5 days. We provide coverage over 5 days, and we each have different days off to make sure we're providing that service to people. What you do find also as well, that then means that there are often fewer meetings on Mondays and Fridays, which has allowed people to find even more efficiencies in how they work, so they can focus on project work or individual pieces of work that may be more difficult during the week. So it's a bit of both, and I absolutely echo what Dave said in terms of it's that flexibility in that working with your people to allow for that, both from a business perspective and from a people perspective. Andrew, I'm going to pass a question to you, because I've heard you talk about this really well in the past. So we're often asked around sales targets specifically. So when and what have you seen in organisations? Do they reduce their sales targets by 20% when they reduce down to 4 days?
Short answer, no. Next question. No, look, I mean, here's the thing. We're quite clear. 100, 80, 100. 100% pay, 80% time, 100% output. This is not about reduction of sales targets, not the reduction of any target. All you're trying to do with this is eliminate the things that get in the way of the people who actually, when they're trying to do the tasks that they have. Now, it's very interesting, some really interesting work done by, of all people, Gap some years ago. And what they found is that when you trade shifts, so you're doing exactly the same shift, it's just the shift you wanted to work, what happens is that sales actually went up, and they went up 10%. So we saw in our business, we've been doing this now for 4 years, that our output has continually gone up. We're now twice as productive on a per capita basis than our nearest competitor. So this is not about things going down. It's actually eliminating often the things that get in the way of your people, whether they're in the back office, whether in the front line and in sales, that get in the way of them performing to their peak. And therefore, no, most of the time, the data we're seeing is, in fact, sales actually go up quite a lot. And in some cases, we've seen performance improve by about 50% by asking your people to do the thing that is important and working less time.
Thank you. So there are a few questions around kind of start and finish times and flexibility within the 4-day week. So we operate, as we said, our customer window is 8 till 8. So we ensure that we meet that need 7 days a week across the business. And start times generally would be between 8 and 6. When we started our trial, we asked that people were available at core times in the day, so between 9:30 and 4:30, and that was to allow us to kind of have the right people in the right place at the right time to ensure that we could continue to do business and have our meetings that needed people to be there. However, we also offered flexibility. So we knew that, and Dave actually touched on this, that longer days don't work for some people with various personal responsibilities and commitments. And I think the flexibility is key around that. So, having commitment from your people to be there at core times in the day, but have flexibility around that to be able to allow them to continue to have their personal lives and to benefit from the well-being aspects. Mandating a 4-day week and working hours was never going to work out, and we never would consider that. This is all about flexibility on both parts. So see what you can do with that within your teams, but see what you need people to absolutely be around for to make sure that your business can still operate. Dave, is there anything you wanted to add to that, just while I check out any other questions? Don't worry if not, I can be quick.
No, I would say to basically on roll varied, cameras being turned off because maintenance die. So it's people who are doing task-based roles found this quite easier to adapt to. We found the original pressure within leadership and management roles of different challenges based on how they were conducting their role over the course of the week. So I think it's looking at those things and not dismissing them and then trying to find the way to make it work.
Great, thank you. We've had a question around holiday allowance as well. So this was something that we worked on throughout the trial. Within the trial, we didn't change our holiday allowance. We were hugely optimistic that our trial would work, but also conscious that we needed to meet the needs of our people and ensure we didn't make any permanent changes whilst we were still planning and still overcoming challenges. When we decided to make our 4-day week permanent, which was going from a 37.5-hour week to 34 hours without a reduction in pay, we decided to look across all of our other employee benefits to see actually what we might want to align within that. And holiday allowance was one of them. So we did decide to prorata holiday allowance. However, when we were going through this process, we stayed really close with our teams and we talked very, regularly around what the impact of that would be, how people felt about it, what it would mean in line with their 4-day week and the work that they were able to carry out in the business. And actually, our employees were hugely supportive of that in a sense of the benefit that they were receiving from a 34-hour week. They were happy for that to be prorated. There were other things as well that we considered as we were doing that. We worked with our People Forum extensively, who are the group of individuals that kind of talk to others in the organisation on our behalf. We had forums, we had drop-in sessions to really make sure that we were hearing entirely what our people were thinking and feeling before we made any permanent changes. We then moved everybody permanently to a 34-hour working week contract from January the 1st, 2023. And that was again to a 34-hour week for the same pay. So yes, we worked quite extensively within the trial, not just in what it was doing to our business in terms of performance and metrics, but actually for our people and the employee value proposition and what we were continuing to offer on that basis. So hopefully that's answered that question. Andrew, I'm going to put this one to you and put you on the spot. Absolutely love the 4-day week concept. I'm struggling to get my head around how this could be done in a manufacturing environment where there's already conflict between operational and office functions. Have you come across any organisations like that, Andrew?
Oh, a small one that's done it. It's called Volkswagen. So the irony is that some of the biggest manufacturing businesses in the world that do it work a 4-day week. Interestingly, if you look at Holland, Holland actually has the lowest number of hours per week in Europe as well. And you look at that and it's high 20s, 26, 28. Now that's across all sectors. The key thing actually with all of this is that you can't try and answer the question in advance. What you've got to do is say, look, here is a proposition. how do we make ourselves more productive? Because clearly, if you don't think there are any possible improvements in your business, you are saying that you have reached, and I just don't believe that, right? So what you're doing is you're going, let's sit back, let's have a look at what is impacting. And that could be how your production line is addressed. It could be that you've got a lot of rework at the end of the day because you've got lots of people who are getting tired. What happens when you change the shift patterns? What do you do? And really with manufacturing, it actually is about changing shift patterns, especially if you've got a business that's working 24/7, which is the case in Volkswagen. All they've done is reorganize shifts, and they've made it that each shift is shorter, and that therefore has delivered the outcome, which is reduction in working hours. But remember, what works for me doesn't necessarily work for you. So this is a journey that each organization has got to go on for themselves.
Thank you. And actually, just following on from that, if you have another question that's coming is, could this also work in the public sector in the interest of the general public? I guess it's similar to your to how you've just answered that. But has there been anything specific in the public sector that you've come across?
Iceland was all public sector in essence, and so the results were pretty good in Iceland. Look, you've got to come back to the very first proposition. Let's go with this one. I'm going to be careful how I phrase this. Do you actually think there is no possibility for productivity improvement in the public sector? Now, I think most of us would answer that by saying, well, we think the problem is productivity. So the question is, how do you get that? Now, part of this is about the incentive. One, as Anne-Marie said, and Dave said as well, you have to work out how you measure productivity. Currently, we don't measure productivity, we use time. So as part of this exercise, once you start measuring the output that you want, then you can start to focus people and saying, well, actually, if you deliver on that output, then we'll gift you this extra time off. Now that then becomes a decent incentive. I would argue that most of the public service has probably very little goals set in the first instance, no measurement of whether they're actually delivering on those things, and no analysis of whether there is a whole pile of wasted time. And the great example of this, let's think about meeting times in the public service, which is probably true. Microsoft in Japan did a very simple experiment. No more than 5 people in a meeting, no meeting longer than half an hour. Please use Microsoft Teams, and got a 39.9%. I'm sure there are lots of ways that we could extract that out of the public service.
Thank you. Another question that's coming around part-time workers. So how did we work with people who may have already dropped to a 4-day week prior to our trial? So we offered flexibility within our trial for that. So anyone that had dropped hours, we offered them the opportunity to further prorata their time in line with our reduction from 37.5 hours to 34 for the same pay, or we increased their pay. So it was really important to us that we offered that flexibility for people. And different things are important to different people. Some people told us that the time was more valuable to them, where others financially, they wanted to benefit in the same way that other people in the organisation were. So again, it's putting it back to working with your people and those who are on part-time working hours to figure out how you can best make it work for them and the business. Another question around hybrid working. So I mentioned that Atom operate a hybrid working model. We have since the beginning of the pandemic, well, the end of the pandemic. So we have people across the organisation working either from their home location or an office location. And we ask our people to work from where they are most productive for the job that they are doing and the work that they are doing. This has remained through 4-day week, so people can continue to work in a hybrid way. We do have people coming into our office in Durham, and we probably have around 200 people on a weekly basis coming into that space. We have a smaller office in London as well, and we have teams working out of that space as well to come together for team kind of activities, meetings, and for them to really define how they want to use that space. So we run both things together, both hybrid and 4-day week. Just let me look for another question here. Dave, one for you on the contact centre. Were there other, what other service level metrics did you use in benchmarking success?
So I think the first thing we did is evaluate whether we had all the right data points in place already. So we already measured average handling time and speed to answer. We actually went and looked at complaint metrics as well to see whether would we see an increase in complaint handling off the back of this. So I guess a lot of the standardized contact center metrics you would expect to see around running an efficient call center was the benchmark. And what we wanted to see was, by putting this in place, one, do you still have enough shift coverage with the size of the shifts you've got in? Because we still needed to operate 7 days a week, 8 till 8. But it might be over more teams, but the teams were smaller. And then we were measuring those on a monthly basis to see if there'd been any upward turn, downward turn, or a level playing field on that data.
Great, thank you. So the question about our senior leadership. So was Mark, your CEO, bought into this from day one, and did you have to convince him of the benefits? Mainly wondering about how important it is to have buy-in from the top in order to have a chance of this actually being implemented. It absolutely does, I think, need buy-in from the top. Mark, our CEO, was a key driver in 4-day week, was hugely interested in the concept, and actually started to talk with our senior leaders around what this might mean, generally as a working concept, along with lots of other things that we were considering at the time. So Mark has been hugely supportive of this, however, has had to manage and kind of support the business case and the risks associated with it as well. So the fact that he supported it didn't mean that it was a given. The operational planning and the business case, the proof points, and the support that we've given to our people in the organisation have been key in that. People ask me, how do you influence senior leaders? I mean, the research, I can't stress as much, the research is there, it is to be believed. There are, now even more pilots and studies, and Andrew in the 4-day week is spearheading that even more so. Data from inside your organisation on how things are going at the moment and how people are feeling. Start to benchmark that for yourself. And have the conversation. Talk to other organisations that have implemented it, share some experience. This is all part of why we wanted to put this together, was to bring it to life for companies that just see the data. We're more than happy to kind of continue to share and answer lots of other questions coming in that we'll not have time to answer, unfortunately, this morning, but we will think of a way to answer your questions and to make sure that we can continue to support in that way. So senior leadership key. I think, get the research out, get the data, network with others, and see what you can achieve from that. Okay, I think we'll have time for one last question. So just bear with me. There are many that have come in. We're about to implement a 6-month pilot with teams 35 hours down to 28 a week. We've already made lots of efficiencies. Any advice on how to implement where you've had fewer efficient... Oh, it's disappeared. Any advice on how you can implement in teams that may find fewer efficiencies? I think this really is about engaging with your people. So they're the people that really understand their jobs, doing them day to day. They'll have an opinion on what they think brings value to the business, as well as what they believe and do as well. So continue to engage with your people. As I've said, I was asked the question when we first announced 4-day a week to Anne-Marie, how are you going to plan shift patterns and how are you going to find all of these efficiencies in the organisation? It was never ever going to be me that did that. And Dave has talked really well in terms of the operational aspect and planning and engaging and involving people. That will be where you find efficiencies. but challenge yourself as an organisation as well, how often you meet, how many people are in your meetings, you know, and be brutal in terms of the decisions that you make, in terms of, you know, giving time back to people and the business. So look at everything, you know, roll over every stone, because there's often things that we look past every day and we just do it without even thinking about it. We've been working 5 days, a 5-day week for over 100 years. That's a lot to find in terms of efficiencies and kind of how we do things. So I would encourage you to keep doing that. So we've hit nearly 12 o'clock. I want to thank everybody who's dialed into the webinar. Thank you so much. Specifically Andrew. Andrew, it's been great to have you with us. Thank you. And I hope the pilots continue to go from success to success. We will absolutely be working with you alongside that. Dave, thank you for giving up your time to share your experience in terms of how we've implemented it in Atom. It has been a roller coaster. You've been on it with us, but I think you'll agree it's actually worked out well for your teams as well as the business. And thank you to everyone else. Any other questions, please see the contact details on the end of the on the screen just there, and we'll gather all of the other questions that were placed in the Q&A and make sure we communicate some of those answers out to continue to support people in their 4-day week journey. Thank you very much.